Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. My name is Angelia and today I am coming here with a tag. It is the, what is this called? How do we rate our books tag? This tag was originated by Emily at Novelle Reads and I was tagged by the wonderful Kim at Middle of the Book March, and I will include both of their videos in the notes below. This is a tag that asks the booktuber to explain their rating system, how they assign different star ratings to different books. And I have found it really interesting to watch other people's versions of this tag, because if I like that booktuber and I watch their videos, it's really interesting to me to hear their thought process of how they come up with the ratings that they do, and different systems, different criteria in the examples that they give of books. And I pick up a few book ideas along the way from their higher ranked books. And so in watching them too, I find that I start comparing and contrasting my own style of evaluating books as they are talking. And so it's really interesting to me to make this video now. And I will attempt to explain or reveal some of the machinations of my bookish mind. And it's a fun, chatty video. So thank you, Kim, for tagging me and asking me to think a little closer about my methods of evaluation. So here we go. Now, first of all, my first little sort of a disclaimer is that I don't actually put ratings on Goodreads or anywhere else. I keep a physical journal, and I have talked before about this. Is I've been keeping a reading journal for, I'm gonna say maybe like 22, 23 years now, and I have them all, and each of them begins with my consideration list, and that just goes on and on. Every time I hear about a book that sounds interesting to me, I put it on the list. The L's are the ones that the library has or has ordered in that should appear at my library. I've talked a few times about how slow that process is, but I won't go back over that. And then on each one, I just write my thoughts about the book after I read it. I don't really write down the DNFs. I might mention those in my videos, but I don't write a lot about them in my journal. I just write about the completed books, and sometimes I put a star by the book if it was particularly excellent, memorable, hit me in the feels, something about it. So I'll kind of get into that. So I don't really on a regular basis assign the stars, but I can translate my thoughts about books into the 5-star system. And that's what I'm doing for the purpose of this video. And it was very fun to try to do that, to figure out, well, what is my example of a 2-star, 3-star, and so on. So that's what I'm doing today. See, it's already exceedingly chatty, and it's only going to get worse from here. The first prompt is, how often do you DNF, and what makes you DNF? I have the questions right over here on my Chromebooks. That's what I'm looking at over here. So DNFing. I don't DNF really often, and it's not because I make myself keep reading. I am very open to DNFing. I have no hesitation, but I'm just, where my hesitation is in the beginning. So what I have more often than DNF is FTL, failure to launch. And that is my process of opening books and flipping through them and reading just the first page or two, and then and going on to another one. And I FTL through lots and lots of library books. I basically will check out anything that looks even vaguely interesting and things that I know I don't really have time for, just because I want to take them home and take a look at them at my leisure, even though I know, and I'll write them down in my book if I think I'm going to come back and check them out later, but I just don't want to read them now. And then some of them are just FTL. I look at them and I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. So I do that a lot. But the second part of the question is, what makes you DNF? So I considered a DNF if I've gotten a substantial way into the book and I was planning to continue reading the book. I got past the FTL gatekeeper of my mind and now I'm reading it, but then something has made me decide to stop. And there's a few different reasons. It might be really boring. It might be I just seriously dislike the characters and the tone. I think the most common reason is it's boring. So that's kind of what happened in this book, Scatterlings, that I tried to read. I wanted to like it. It was a gift, and it was just the tone. It was supposed to take place in the 1920s, but it read like something way earlier. Everyone was very stiff and stodgy in the dialogue, and it went on and on with these old folklore tales, and it was just tedious. So tedious is a big turnoff to me, and I'm not going to wait for a book to get better. I'm not reading something that everybody says, oh, but just stick with it because all of a sudden 280 pages in, it's all going to click. I'm like, no. I just showed you my multiple page TBR. So no, we're moving on to something else. Here's another example. I DNF'd the family Chao. I was really excited about this mystery. It sounded so good. It had these Dostoevsky vibes. And right off the bat, everybody in the story was just either offensive, dull, very dislikable. There was nothing to latch onto and move forward with. I could find no footing. And so I did not get very far and I DNF'd it. And this book, the only reason it's still here is because I'm so lazy and I have this big stack of books that I want to go put in a little free library and just go perpetrate this on somebody else. But I just haven't done it yet. But it's sticking around. This one is sticking around out of guilt because it was a gift, and maybe I'll try give it another chance in the future. And it also is pretty, so it has pretty points. But so those are some DNFs and kind of my thought there. But I would say maybe actual DNF, only 1 or 2 a month, because I just don't get that far. I cut them off really fast, and I'm super picky about what I'm going to read next. I really think about my mood, the reviews, the time period, the genre, what do I really feel like, and then I start with a few pages and I set it aside and pick something else if it doesn't seem right. The next prompt is, do you rate books 1 star? Well, no, because of course I don't really rate them at all, but I think that would be a DNF. If it was that bad to me, if that unsuited to my tastes, then I didn't read it, and I wouldn't want to give it a rating if I didn't read the whole thing. I feel like in order to give it a rating, I have to have read the book. So I wouldn't do a 1 star. The only thing I could think where that would happen would be if I read the whole book for some reason and it was really it was offensive. There was something reprehensible about the book or its author, and I wanted to rant about it and put it on the record, maybe then. But otherwise, there wouldn't really be a reason for a 1 star. So then we go to, what is a 2-star book to you? When I think of a 2-star book, this is a book that I didn't really like. It wasn't special to me. It might not have been terrible. I might have thought it wasn't good. I might have thought I'm the wrong reader for this book. I'm trying to be a little diplomatic about it, but to me it's just books that weren't, I read the whole thing and it was meh, just wasn't very good. I'm not going to keep it, probably not going to recommend it because it wasn't strong enough. I don't get through the 1-star ones because I just didn't even finish them. But if I actually finished it and I was really disappointed, it's a 2-star book. So that to me is not a good rating, and somebody else might love that book and have success with it, and all power to you, but I just couldn't. All right, here's an example of a 2-star book. I was so disappointed last year in this book. You Have a Friend in Tene by Maggie Shipstead. This came out very shortly after I had read Great Circle. I loved Great Circle. even though I agree with a lot of people that the modern day part of the story was not as strong as the historical part. And when I think back on that book and why I like it, I think of the historical, the setting in the past and those characters. But I was excited enough that when this appeared, I bought it without looking it up, I just like, ooh, I just bought it. I was so jazzed. And it was a dud. It's a collection of previously published stories. And there are a couple of good ones in here, but I can't tell you anything about this. I remember nothing. I read the whole book, nothing at all stuck, except a vague feeling of disappointment and buyer's regret. So this was a 2. It wasn't so bad that I stopped reading, but it also was not good. And really, it was a letdown because I know that the author could write something excellent, and this wasn't it. So this was a 2. The next prompt is a 3-star book a good book for you? This is an interesting question because 3 stars, some people feel that is a lackluster rating, and to other people it's a strong rating. To me, a 3 is that book that I liked things about it. I can see strengths and weaknesses. I didn't love the book. It wasn't the greatest success, but also I don't regret that I read it. And I can see why some people would really like it more than me. And I can even think of maybe people I would recommend it to. It wasn't my favorite, but it has merits that I feel like it's worthwhile to take time and discuss on my channel or write about in my journal. So an example of that would be one that I talked about just last week, which was Scary Monsters by Michelle de Kretser. And it is a novel in 2 parts. In my review, I talk about how to me it just felt like 2 novellas with some similar themes. I didn't see anything connecting the 2 parts to make it a novel, and it has a gimmick of one story starting this way and the other story starting that way. They're set in 2 time periods. One takes place in the 80s, one takes place in the near future, and it's dystopian. The dystopian half worked better for me than the other part, and that's another thing that would make it a 3. If there's an aspect of it that's really strong to me, but something else not so much, and it's just like highs and lows while I'm reading. So part of it was boring, part of it was interesting. Overall, you boil that together and you get a score kind of in the middle. So that's where I get a 3. And I'll show you another 3 in a few minutes. I have a little something that's coming up, but Scary Monsters would be a 3. Then of course the next question is, what do 4 stars mean to you? So for the 4-star question, to me a 4-star book, those are the really good ones. Those are the ones I really enjoyed reading all the way through. I was excited to talk about it on my channel. I was probably telling Steven some things about it as I read. I have a longer entry on it in my journal. I would recommend it to people. It might make my top 20, 25. I don't know if it'll make my top 10 because we got to talk about the 5 stars, but these are the ones that I really liked. These are solid, enjoyable. I think I read the most in this category. I read a lot of 4s, a good number of 5s, some 3s. And the other ones, like I don't get that far in the 1s and 2s because I DNF them. So that's kind of how it rounds out. I pulled an example. I pulled a classic and a contemporary, more recent read that I would call 4s. So my classic 4 is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I've read The Moonstone 2 or 3 times, so I like it enough that I would reread it. But I wouldn't put it on my list if I said, well, what's your 10 favorite classics to take to a desert island? I wouldn't pick The Moonstone. It's not that high up, but it's really fun and I really enjoy it, and I like Wilkie Collins. I like it enough. I'm going to take a look at it again later this year for the Classics and Company discussion. But so that's an example of a classic 4. I'm not going to go on about why. I'll go on a little bit about why I like it. It's an early mystery novel, and the mystery is a theft. And it also has multiple narrators, which I find fun and I usually highly endorse. Okay, so that's 4 classics. A contemporary 4 that's also a mystery is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. Now, a lot of people found her previous book, The Great Believers, to be an excellent 5-star read, and I did as well. I would give this a 4-star. Now, some people, they were disappointed that this was a different kind of book, a different kind of literary level of book, but I thought it was really, really good. I thought the mystery was good. I liked the narration. It takes place in a boarding school that this woman has to go back and teach a podcast class at her school that she went to when she was in high school as a scholarship student of limited means. And she has memories of this being a rather awkward and terrible time in her life. But part of this is about the essence of your memory and how people remember things differently. People perceived you differently than how you thought you presented. And it has to do with the murder in her senior year of her roommate, her former roommate, and the subsequent conviction of an athletic trainer who was the only Black faculty member who did confess to the murder, but some people have never been satisfied with that. And one of her students decides to do, as her podcast, a true crime story about this case. And then all this crap comes up. So it was really highly enjoyable. And when I talk about 5 stars, I'm going to try to capture the essence of why this is a 4, not a 5, even though it was really good and I would recommend it to people who like mystery stories. The next question is, do you ever do half-star ratings? And no, I do not. And I'm going to take a pass on that one to leave a little space for something I'm going to say instead in just a minute. So let's move on to number 7. Do you rate books 5 stars often? And what do 5 stars do to make them rate that high? Okay, I love this question and how it specifically asks what the book has to do to get that. And this is one of the hardest things to explain, because I think that the answer to this lies in my emotions. Because a 4-star book, this book, it had lots of things for me to think about. I would love to have discussion of it, but it didn't put a dent in my soul. I think that the 5-star reads, for good or ill or irreparable damage, have put some kind of dent in my soul. 4s and 5s are the ones that I'm going to reread, but the 5s are the ones that the minute I close the book, I already want to reread right away. Let's grab some examples. All right, once again, I pulled a classic and a contemporary example of a 5-star read. And these are both books. One of them I've reread many times because it's a classic, and the other one I've just recently reread. You can probably feel it coming, what book that's going to be, because I'm kind of obsessed with it right now. So let's start with the classic, and it is Jane Eyre. And I have to show off, I am actually wearing a Bronte shirt today. All right, so Jane Eyre, I've read it many times. I think I first read it probably in my college days. I never had to read this for a class. It was always a pleasure read, and thank goodness, because there are many, many pleasures to be had. I love Jane Eyre, and this is, okay, another thing about 5-star reads, especially the classics, is every time I read it, I find something that I didn't see or think about before. And part of that's about me being in different places as I move through my life, and you know, looking through my lens of whatever point I've reached in my maturity and seeing things in a different light. And so Jane Eyre is one of those books that I always get, I get the story, the same favorite passages, and they are like old friends. And then I see extra things, or I see it from a new angle. And it's like someone comes through with a spotlight and they shine different things on different aspects of the story for me every time I move through it again. And when it's sitting on the shelf, it's just whispering to me to come back to it because it has something more for me. And just talking about it, that's another thing about a 5-star read. Just talking about it makes me want to read it again right on the spot. So Jane Eyre from the classics, and then contemporary, you know what it's going to be, right? Station 11. You were going to say Catcher in the Rye, weren't you? No, I faked you out. I went with my other current obsession. Catcher in the Rye is an all-time obsession. It's a 6-star book, but Station 11 is a recent 5-star reread, and I was sad on the last page. The story, I knew what was going to happen in the story because I read it before, and not really that many years ago. And as I reached the final page, I was just bereft of having to leave the story again. So that's what makes it 5 stars, is how it's like it's sort of visceral or something. Also, it has nothing to do with, it doesn't have to do with the, I talked about classics and contemporary. That's not it. It's not about the length either. So here's an example of a really short and a really long book that are both 5-star reads. And these are both from last year as well. So very short. Foster. It has, I don't even think it has 100 pages. It has, the end of it is a sample of small things like these. It has 92 pages, and it is just indescribably beautiful. And she doesn't waste a single word. And it just shimmers. It's so good. But then we also have, and it even kind of matches, we have Cloud Cuckoo Land clocking in, I don't know, this looks like it's in the 626 pages. Also, I will contend, not a word wasted. Some people will say they disagree with this. Some people really got bogged down. I could not put this down. This book, it took me forever to work my way up to reading it because I had big book trepidation. But once I started, I just engulfed it and I could not stop. Every time it switched to the different characters, I was so impatient to get back to the other people. It drove me nuts, and I loved it. And once again, just talking about it, I feel like it's time to go back. When my niece Amanda was talking about it in our family video, I thought, oh, I need to read that again. So I love Cloud Cuckoo Land. It's a 5. And just for fun, I wanted to just, before I go to the next prompt, this is my prompt that I'm inventing to insert in instead of half-star ratings, is to take one category or genre and show the range. And so I'm going to take short story collections and show you a DNF through a 5. Hold on. So I love short stories, and I often read short story collections, and I have all kinds of mixed outcomes of this. So this is just another example of how I would rate books, DNF through 5 short stories. All right, so the DNF, Rash, Burning Bright. I tried 2 stories in it. I hated them both. They were cruel, harsh, nasty, violent, yucky. So I'm DNFing that. We already talked about the number 2. I don't do 1. So number 2 was the disappointing Maggie Shipstead with You Have a Friend in 10A. A 3 that was also a little disappointing, Bliss Montage by Ling. I loved her novel Severance, and then this one was just okay. It was a mixed bag, as often happens in short story collections. I really strongly liked a few of them. A few of them I just could take or leave. None of them were terrible, but it wasn't, I was expecting more and I did not get it. So love the cover, the oranges in the bag. I will try the ones I liked again. I want to keep the book because of the strength of the stories I really did like that I want to reread. A 4 for short fiction was If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery. This one got a lot of buzz last year, and I think that it deserved it, but there was a book that deserved it even more that is coming up in 2 seconds. But it's good. I really liked it. I would recommend it to people. A couple of the stories really stand out in my memory, and I will read them again. It's a solid 4. When he comes out with a new book, I'm going to be interested in reading it. But it didn't take up a space in my heart like the next book did, which got the 5. Can you guess what it is? A short story collection that I loved so much. It's Night of the Living Res by Morgan Talty. This is one I want to read it again. Stephen and I both really loved this collection. It is so good. It's about David, a young man who lives on reservation in Maine, and it takes place from his childhood through his early adulthood. But the stories are linked and they're mixed up in chronological ways. So you might read a story from his teen years, then a story from his mid-20s, and one when he's a kid. But they are absolutely stellar, exquisite. They wrecked me, and they made me laugh. They were devastating. They were everything. So all the range of emotions in these stories. And David and then his friend Fellas is, I mean, just the first story, and already I loved Fellas, even though he's in a very compromised position in this story. But I'm not going to say anything more. Please read Night of the Living Res. This is a 5-star. I can't wait to read it again. So that's my little exercise in the range of stars in one particular book category. Question 8 is, has your rating of books changed over the years? I'm sure it has, because I've changed over the years. And if I look at a journal from 10 years ago, and I have done this, I look at it, I see some book that I rave about, and I can't even remember it. Even within a year, sometimes when I get to the end of the year, what I thought was the strongest has shifted, or the book has, sometimes they marinate after you read them and they gain in strength. I do change. I don't go back. I don't have them recorded anywhere, so I don't actually go back and reassign them, but I do rethink them when I come across them again, when I look back over my own journals, or when I look at the end of the year, what I think was really at the top, which leads to number 9, which is, where do you record your ratings of your books? And I've kind of already talked about that. I don't officially record them anywhere. I keep them for my own thoughts, and I talk about them on my channel, but I don't actually assign them. I don't go to Goodreads. I do go to it and read things to help me think about books, but I don't go there and place ratings. I like to read, I sometimes like to read them in advance, but I'm kind of wary and careful about reading too many reviews in advance, except to get the gist. I'm more likely to kind of look and see if a book got Kirkus stars, booklist stars, but not read too much about it from individual readers, or I'll rely on booktubers and their suggestions, because they're pretty careful about spoilers, more careful than me. And but I like to read those reviews after I read the book as part of my gathering of my thoughts. It's interesting to see what someone else thought were the strengths and weaknesses of a book after I'm no longer in fear of them giving away too much plot. And my last thought on this topic that I've heard a couple of different people discuss that I agree with is that the nature of the book, sometimes it's a very apples and orangey kind of thing, because the nature of a book, the style, the purpose of a book, it can be so different from another that it's hard. Like what I would say is a absolute fantastic thriller is a different criteria than what I want out of Jane Eyre, which actually does have a little dash of the thriller in it, or what I want out of Cloud Cuckoo Land, or what I want out of Anna Karenina. You know, like there's things that just cannot compare to one another as far as, well, which of these books is better? But I can compare with how I feel as a reader having read them, what they've done for me. How have they entertained me? How have they enlightened me? Have I learned anything? Has my heart been bent and tattered from the process? So these kind of things, or you know, did it bring me joy? So this is what I look at when I rate my books. So I don't know if any of this made sense or if it just made it even murkier, but you can let me know what you agree or disagree with in my video. I'm not going to tag anybody because I feel like I'm coming in on the tail end of this tag, and I know I've watched a lot of videos of this tag. So I'm kind of afraid there's nobody left. But if you haven't done it, maybe you're a newer booktuber and you would like to think about these questions too, please consider yourself tagged and have a wonderful day. I'll be back with Friday Reads.